All right, welcome back. UP Power, Kevin McNulty and Keegan Cooper back with you, and we are a little over 12 hours removed from the national title game, Keegan, in NCAA men's basketball. We'll start there and narrow our focus as we move forward, but the UConn Huskies take down Purdue. They are the kings of college basketball and back-to-back champs, the first time in 17 years since 2007 when Florida did it. Man, they were dominant throughout the tournament, won every game by more than 13 points. You know, I would have liked a little bit more parity in the tournament this year, but also you have to appreciate what they've done over the past 2 years.
Yeah, the UConn Huskies, a dominant force in men's basketball, and really when you look at each game this year in the NCAA tournament, making the right play, unselfish play, rebounding, shooting the ball incredibly well. I mean, scoring 70, 75 points every single game throughout the tournament, not an easy feat.
Nope.
Especially when you look at the competition that they're going up against, some other high power level men's basketball programs. But UConn ultimately coming up to face Purdue in the national title game, and 6-point game going in halftime, close one, and then you just saw the Huskies slowly build that lead to double digits, and then the inevitable of Purdue could not catch up.
Yeah, well, here we'll break down the game a little bit. UConn's guards won this game for him. Donovan Clingan did a great job, probably better than anyone's done on Zach Edey, at least in the tournament throughout the season. He wasn't going to fill up the stat sheet. He wasn't going to play 39.5 minutes like Edey did. Edey was going to fill up the stat sheet, and that was UConn's plan, was to let him get his. And that's when I think teams have had the best success against Edey, the two-time National Player of the Year. First player to do that in college since Ralph Sampson in the 80s. Like, an incredible college career that guy had playing in the Big Ten. And this year with the tournament success added to that. But, yeah, UConn knew that their guards were going to outmatch Purdue's guards if they defended well, which they did so well. Purdue only rattled off 1 3 in the entire game. They only shot 7 threes. That's the most impressive part to me, is Purdue was one of the best three-point shooting teams in the country all season long. That's Braden Smith, Mason Gillis in the corner, Fletcher Lawyer at times. Lawyer looked like he didn't belong on the floor last night, unfortunately, because I like him, like watching him play. He was not big enough to match up with a lot of UConn's guards. Even though he's 6'4", he's thin as a rail, and that showed, both on the offensive and defensive end, but only getting off 7 threes for a team that shot the three really well. That's part of the reason why they got to the championship game this year after being knocked out in the first round as a 1 seed a year ago. That was UConn's game plan. Dan Hurley said after the game that it was Luke Murray who ran the scout on Purdue ahead of this game, that, you know, the 48 hours that they have to prep for the national title game after the national semifinals on Saturday, and Murray did a masterful job. They did everything they needed to do so that when Edey slowed down a little bit, you can't blame the loss on Zach Edey, obviously.
Yeah.
He had 37 points. But once he got into a little lull at the end of the first half, start of the second half, UConn capitalized, and that was it.
Yeah, that was it. And when you look at UConn and their unselfish play on the offensive end, making the extra pass, finding the extra pass, slipping the screen to get to an open lane, they put the ball in the basket, and ultimately Edey slowed down. UConn didn't slow down. The offense still continued, and that was kind of the big decider.
Yeah, you couldn't expect them to. I mean, when you think about Tristan Newton and, you know, Stefan, the freshman, they were just too good all season long, and they proved it in the championship game. Pretty remarkable, back-to-back. Danny Hurley loses 5 of his 8 players who played major minutes in the tournament a year ago, a couple of them to the NBA, and he reloads.
Does it again.
And that's the difference between teams that have gone back-to-back in the past. You think about Florida, they brought everyone back, Al Horford, Joakim Noah, Corey Brewer, and those guys. They ran it back, and they won it again. With UConn, it was Clingan was a freshman last year, didn't play nearly as much as he does now. They had Jordan Hawkins and they had Adama Sanogo, 2 NBA players. They left. All right, here we go. Cam Spencer, Man, that dude transferred over from Rutgers. I think he started his career at Loyola, Maryland. He was unbelievable.
Yep.
He's got a ticker unlike anyone else in the college game. They are a fun team to watch, but I'm of the camp now. UConn's got to start losing. Like we can't have the team winning the national title every year. People are going to start to turn on UConn. I'm just saying.
Yeah, they are. I mean, it's we talked about. I'm going to make this comparison: Ishpeming girls basketball and the dominant wave that they had. We might be starting to see UConn have this dominant wave on the men's basketball side, like the women's has had.
They're already there, as far as I'm concerned.
Back-to-back national champions. You take down the two-time national player of the year, and don't get me wrong, Zach Edey, what a performance in the tournament, 37 points in the national title game. Can't really ask too much more for multiple blocks, rebounds, double-double. Just offensively outmatched. When Purdue doesn't shoot threes, you're trading threes for two.
No, and that's what I said. That's why they were back in this position with the number 1 seed and why they really, just like UConn, rolled their way to the national title. They didn't – I mean, Tennessee was a tough game for them for sure because Tennessee could have been a Final Four team easily as a 2 seed the way they played up until Purdue. That was the only real test that Purdue had. Gonzaga hung for a little bit, and then NC State didn't even do that in the Final Four on Saturday. So Purdue waltzed their way to the national title game too, and these two were on a collision course. But, I mean, it's pretty rare by the end of the season. We know who the best team was. We know who the second best team was. Then there was everyone else who couldn't really match up with them. And that's kind of where it is at the end of this thing. Another fun college basketball season. And I have to bring this up. We talked about this with Big Ten teams getting to the Final Four because this was the first Big Ten team to go since Michigan State in 2019. Well, it's just another team that loses in the national title game. Let's go through the list.
Yeah.
It's depressing as someone who grew up rooting for every Big Ten team then went to Maryland, a Big Ten school now. Since Michigan State won the national title in 2000, here's the Big Ten teams to get to the national title game. Not even the Final Four. We talked about teams that have gone to the Final Four, come up short. Since 2000, Indiana loses to Maryland in 2002, so technically Maryland is the last team to win a national title that's currently in the conference. That was 2002. And then you look at 2005, Illinois. We talked about that team. They get there, come up short to North Carolina. You can add UCLA to the list in 2006, losing to Florida. 2007, Ohio State gets there. They lose to Florida. 2009, Michigan State gets there. Loses to North Carolina again. And we're going to keep going down the list. Michigan has gotten there twice in the past 11 years. 2013, they lose to Louisville. 2018, they lose to Villanova. And in between that, you had Wisconsin losing to Duke in 2015. And it's pretty remarkable as you go down the list. Just add Purdue to the list of teams that have come close for the Big Ten Conference, but in the past 24 years, none of them have been able to pull it out and win a title for the Big Ten.
We need a Big Ten champion, and maybe in the next couple of years we'll get it. I mean, basketball is.
I can't point to a team right now that I think it's going to be.
Can do it, yeah. I mean, if we want to quote Tom Izzo, he's getting back to a deeper
with the
run.
transfer portal, which we're all too familiar with today and this week and the last couple of weeks, right? As basketball and hockey have wrapped up here, we have no idea what these teams are going to look like next year.
They could be.
I would maybe say Illinois is the favorite in the Big Ten next year.
I think so.
Because Purdue's going to be good, but they won't have Edey.
Yeah.
So I don't think they're national title contender. Good. Brad Underwood, if he doesn't go to Kentucky, we got to talk about that.
Yeah.
Talk about news to shake up college basketball. John Calipari leaving Kentucky to go to Arkansas. Got bought by the chicken guy.
Yeah.
Mr. Tyson.
Yeah, and I think, some people might see it as a surprise, but he's been in Kentucky for 15 years. He's had multiple NCAA
longer than I
tournament
thought.
15 years, wins the national title in 2012.
Yeah.
But then you get to 2015 and now concurrent, and you look at their tournament run where they
Post-COVID is where Cal really lost Kentucky in their rabid fan base, Big Blue Nation. You know,
Yeah.
That's where he's fallen off because all these other teams have gotten older with guys playing in their 5th and 6th year. Exhibit A is Jack Golke at Oakland, who knocked him out of the tournament this year. The guy's 24 years old.
Yeah.
And he's playing against a bunch of 18 and 19-year-olds who are talented as all heck, but running Golke off the screens, they couldn't keep up, and boom, we're out in the first round again. They lose to St. Peter's 2 years ago in the first round as a 2 seed. They lost to North Texas somewhere in there. He hasn't been able to win the way he was used to winning from 2010 to 2015, let's say, when he would get the top talent, Anthony Davis, Devin Booker, Karl Anthony Towns, the Harrison twins. He would just have these mammoth NBA teams, really.
Yeah.
Even as you look across the league right now, it started with John Wall even in 2010. Those were great Kentucky teams under Calipari. You don't win like that anymore.
No, you got to have these 3, 4, 5, 6-year players that are veterans, and that's the other thing with the transfer portal that we've been talking about a lot is getting these athletes to stay at a program for 4 years to contend for a national title.
Not easy to do.
Not easy to do, and the way of
again credit to Zach Edey, playing his 4 years at Purdue, and getting so much better from the time he was a freshman. I remember when he started playing, he was still coming off the bench as a freshman. I believe Purdue still had Isaac Haas, who was another 7-footer, and it was like, oh, Matt Painter does it again. I wonder who's next for Matt Painter, first of all, because if you're 7'2", 7'3", and you have some talent, you probably want to go play for Matt Painter, don't you?
Yeah. When you look at
based on what he did with Zach Edey.
Yeah.
And then it was 2 years ago, Edey was playing with Travion Williams, wasn't getting all the touches, and last year, of course, was when he broke out and became this mammoth inside. And everyone's still picking apart Zach Edey. We don't like watching him play, but to play 40 minutes as a 7'4", 300-pounder throughout the NCAA tournament, and even before that in the Big Ten tournament, it's remarkable. And if you look at the guys across NCAA that are 7'2" and above,
they're not playing.
All the other guys are averaging 3-4 points a game, and he was averaging 25 and 12.
Yeah, and scores 37 in the national title game. It's that old school, I'm going to back you down and shoot hooks over you kind of basketball, and Zach Edey's made it, his kind of identity, and obviously found success with it. 2-time national.
And now the new thing is, there's no way Edey can play in the NBA. I'm not saying he can play in the NBA and that he'll have a great career, but there's going to be a team in the late lottery somewhere in the middle of the first round that says, why don't we go for Zach Edey? Because he said it himself. He can shoot. He's just not asked to shoot under Matt Painter at Purdue. Look at him shoot free throws.
Yeah.
He's really good at the line.
Yeah.
He can shoot.
Yeah, he can.
I've never seen him shoot a 3. That's different in the NBA now because you have, Jokic shooting threes. You have Karl Anthony Towns shooting threes.
Joel Embiid.
Embiid shooting threes. Sure, all these big, mammoth guys who are athletic as heck go out and shoot threes. Maybe Edey can do that too. But if he doesn't, is there an NBA team that says, we can work with that anyway?
Yeah, and when those guys came into the league, they weren't shooting threes. That's something that they, some of them were.
Exactly.
But some of them
Joel Embiid was not
shooting threes.
No.
Karl Anthony Towns was not shooting threes. That's something that they had to learn over the course of now you're with an NBA trainer, now you're in the NBA training facilities. We're going to get you to shoot, corner threes.
And you're a professional.
You're a professional.
And your job, every offseason is to get better even, throughout the season.
So that's what they do. I think for Calipari and Kentucky, it's thank you for being there for 15 years and giving
it's
Kentucky.
A win-win. You and I were talking about this earlier.
Yeah.
Kentucky would have owed him $33 million if they fired him.
Now, if he leaves.
They don't owe him a cent. The buyout's a wash.
Yeah.
And now they can think about going after a coach with a heftier buyout. Now, Nate Oates at Alabama, who obviously lost on Saturday to UConn, took his name out of the running, but he had an $18 million buyout. Now, that's huge, but it's a little bit more than half of what they would have owed Cal if they fired him. So do you take that hit?
Yeah.
Do you take another guy and hire him with a hefty buyout? I think you do, because I don't think I've seen any that are more than $18 million is a lot. But yeah, Kentucky might be on the upswing. with a new head coach, and we know it doesn't take very long to build up a program now.
No, with the transfer portal.
John Shire at Duke took them to an Elite Eight in his second year. You know, obviously he was an assistant under Coach K, so it was less turnover, let's say. But he was able to do it. I mean, Danny Hurley took a team that got knocked out in the first round in 2022, made them two-time national champions the next 2 years, partly because of the portal.
Yeah. Look at Dusty May, FAU is now Michigan's head coach, and what he did with his team.
And how many of those FAU guys is he going to end up bringing? Because a bunch of them are in the portal right now. You know,
probably going to go to Michigan.
Well, it's tough to trade Boca Raton for Ann Arbor when you're playing in January, February, but you know, maybe he does that. I think May's going to do an outstanding job at Michigan because he's just a really good coach.
I think we could see Michigan in. I call it now. Take my hot take, mark this date down. But I think we can see Michigan in an Elite Eight next year. Maybe not a Final Four team. Maybe not contending for the national.
I'm not going to rule it out.
But why not? Calipari parts ways with Kentucky to Arkansas. I think that was an interesting leaving SEC.
He's going to have so much money to spend.
Yeah, he is. And I mean, the
I've
Razorbacks
heard $5 million to spend in NIL, which on a basketball roster, that's huge.
That's a lot of money.
Because what's the big number being thrown around with football teams? It's Ohio State built this crazy roster for next year. They're going to be, I mean, a top 3 team all year long. They're probably going to be better than Michigan, if we're being honest. That was $13 million that he's spending on a football roster. So if Calipari has $5 million to spend on a basketball roster at Arkansas, he can get some pretty good guys in there, and he's probably not going to do it the same way he did it at Kentucky, at least to start, with getting all these 5-star freshmen in there. We'll see. The way too early top 25s, Maryland has made a couple of appearances. Michigan State as well. I think Izzo, once he decided he wants to do this for a couple more years and take a stab at another deep run and go into another Final Four, which would be his 9th, I think he's going in the portal a little bit more this offseason, which should really excite Michigan State fans because all we've been hearing the last couple of years with that team is, A.J. Hoggard and Malik Hall, Tyson Walker will be back for another year and they'll be older, and that just didn't really work out. Because those guys weren't supremely talented offensively, meaning they could score from 3 and get anything they want. They were fun to watch. They were a good team for the past couple of years, but not good enough by Michigan State standards. So I think Izzo's going to go in the portal a little bit, and that should be exciting because, again, you see teams that have success deep in the tournament. Even Purdue going to get Lance Jones from Southern Illinois last year, I don't think they make it to the national title game without Lance Jones.
No.
The way he could shoot it. He got in foul trouble yesterday. That was part of the reason why they didn't get going from deep on top of UConn's defense. Yeah. So I think Izzo will go in the portal a little bit.
And I think you should.
Because obviously he's not dumb. He knows he needs to change. And I think he's going to do that. The other thing I brought up to you, which Michigan State fans might want to tune out for this, Izzo's been to 8 Final Fours since 1999. UConn has been to 6. They've won 6 national championships, and of course Michigan State only has the one in 2000. Still an all-time 25-year run for a program, Michigan State going to 8 Final Fours under Izzo, but there's not that many banners.
The game is changing, and as a head coach for a Division I program, you've got to be able to change with it. We talk about, industry change and things like that. Men's college basketball, women's college basketball, which we'll get into here shortly. When we
I think right now,
Final Four. It's changing, and you've got to get into the changes before you're going to be able to find success, like Calipari and things like that. But Kevin, the women's Final Four and really the national title game, Iowa versus undefeated South Carolina. Caitlin Clark, I think arguably the best college basketball game that I've watched all year, even comparing it to the men's national title game, just because kind of UConn kind of ran away with it at the end there.
Yeah.
The best
I mean, there were a lot of parallels between the 2 title games. Thinking back to Sunday when 18 million people watched on ABC, Caitlin Clark in Iowa trying to knock off undefeated South Carolina, like you mentioned. Clark starts out unbelievably.
Yeah, 18 in the quarter.
That's crazy.
Wow.
And she played outstanding there in the first half. And just like Purdue, when Zach Edey slowed down there late in the first half and Clark slowed down there late in the first half, then South Carolina kind of saw their opportunity and they took it. So you have these two Big Ten teams in Iowa and Purdue that have these star players, National Player of the Years, Caitlin Clark, Zach Edey. They just weren't enough to beat the best team in the country. On the women's side, that was South Carolina. Dawn Staley, I think we both love her.
Yeah, I love you, Dawn Staley. I love you.
Her third national title, and UConn still has 11 on the women's side, but Gino comes up short in the Final Four. Again, he's interesting because he's never lost the national title game, but he's lost, I think, 12 national semifinals now.
Yeah.
Not that that's a knock. He's won 11 national titles. But South Carolina is definitely the queen of the sport. If we're calling UConn the kings of college basketball, South Carolina is definitely the queens of college basketball. Camila Cardoso,
Oh my gosh, yeah.
6'7".
Yeah.
She's a beast.
Yeah, she'll be a lottery pick in the WNBA draft. She declared. Caitlin Clark probably round
She's going
one,
to go
pick one.
number 1 overall to Indiana. She's going to play with Aaliyah Boston. Guess what? They're probably going to be competing for titles next year.
Yeah.
And a lot more people are going to be watching because it's Caitlin Clark. You know,
and you can't not watch it. Yeah, I think, and I told you this before that game tipped off. For Iowa to win, I think Caitlin Clark needs to score 50. And when she had 18 in the first quarter,
Yeah.
I was like,
looking pretty
wow,
good.
she might be on pace for 50, and Iowa might do it. She gets cold. She only has 7 that second period or second quarter to the third quarter. She has about 7, so she gets over that 25 mark.
It's that lull in the middle of
lull.
the game when you're going up against a team like South Carolina, just like Purdue was going up against the best team in UConn. You can't sustain that.
And then-
that's what happened to the Hawkeyes.
Yeah, and then Camila Cardoso. I mean, offensive rebounds, putting it in, running the floor,
And
finding
it's the
her
same
teammates.
thing. It's not all about her either.
No.
She's their best player, probably top to bottom
Mm-hmm.
when you look at the roster, but they're deep. And, yeah, she was outstanding. The whole team was outstanding.
Oh, gosh, their freshman, 19 points in the national title game, and I am blanking on her name right now.
So am I. But, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
a great team, like
I'll
we
look it
said.
up.
Yeah, look it up real quick. So we closed the book on college basketball season, but
I think
at least one more weekend here that I really look forward to. We have the Masters
the Masters.
this week, the first major of the year. I was watching Tiger's press conference this morning. Got me excited. I forget he's going to be playing with Max Homa. They announced the tee times for all these guys on Thursday. He's going to be playing with Max Homa and somebody
I'm
else.
excited. Tessa Johnson,
Yeah.
freshman. So we could say South Carolina's not going to be in any trouble anytime soon. They're going to be just as good. Maybe not as good, but they're going to be up there as one of the top teams next year. Tessa Johnson, freshman, in the national title game, goes off for 19 points.
Onions.
Yeah.
Onions.
I
yeah.
mean, can you beat it? But moving to the Masters, it's just, I mean, it's the Masters. When you say it,
it was
when you talk
gorgeous
about it,
today.
it's gorgeous. It's going to be one of those things where you're just something magical is going to happen across those couple days. You know it is. It's the Masters. It always does.
There's a lot more drama, though, these days heading into the majors
Yeah.
because you have these live guys coming to play with the tour guys.
Mm-hmm.
They all come together for 4 weekends a year. I started Full Swing Season 2, by the way.
Yeah.
Really get me set for Masters Week. But John Rahm's the defending champion, and within the last calendar year since he won the Masters, went to live.
Yeah.
So you have that kind of looming over it, and we'll just talk about some of the favorites. Rory McIlroy, looking for the career Grand Slam, hasn't won a major in, I think, 10 years.
Yeah.
I think 2014 was his last one. I love Rory. I'm a Rory guy. Been rooting for him. I took him to win last year, and he missed the cut. So I'm not gonna put my money where my mouth is with Rory this year, but still one of the top players in the world. Certainly has a chance this weekend. Would love to see him get it done. Like I said, that would be a career Grand Slam. You have Brooks Koepka back, who last year had the 54-hole lead and blew it, and John Rahm came up, and it would be Koepka going for 6, and that would put him in some elite company when you're talking about majors. And then Scottie Scheffler, number 1 player in the world, been
Scheffler.
playing outstanding throughout the beginning of this tour season. A couple of wins under his belt, and he won 2 years ago. He has to be one of the favorites again.
Yeah, he does. I mean, when you look at the lineup of golfers that you're going to see play in the Masters and compete against each other, it's the top players in the world. It's the Masters. There's going to be millions of people watching it. It's going to be an exciting weekend of golf, and I think a historic weekend of golf. If I had to go with somebody, I don't think you can bet against the top player in the world, so I think Scottie Scheffler might have an in him. Brooks Koepka, if he can keep the lead and keep the composure. And then Jon Rahm. Jon Rahm is...
he's fun to watch play because he's got a little tub.
He's got a little hefty.
We're like, oh, that guy with the dad bod. Like, oh, I could go out there and win a Masters. Yeah. No, you couldn't. We couldn't.
We couldn't.
But when you watch Jon Rahm, you're like, oh, one of us.
Yeah, one of us. One of us.
Yeah.
One of us. So no, it'll be exciting to see, to take it all in and see who comes out on top. I think make the cut day one and then put yourself in a position to compete down the stretch. You think it goes to sudden death playoff?
That would be fun.
That'd be fun.
I don't remember the last time we had that.
I couldn't.
Of course, Dustin Johnson, we haven't mentioned, is back after winning the Masters in that weird 2020 year. He won it in November and set the 72-hole record. I wouldn't expect anyone to break that in April. The course played so much faster that year in November, but he's still relevant. That's another live guy who's back. And, one of the things I forgot about is I'm getting ready to, consume all this Masters, and we'll run some highlights this weekend as well. Phil Mickelson tying for second with Koepka last year. Completely forgot about that.
Yeah, Phil Mickelson.
At what, 52 years old? Because I know he won the U.S. Open a couple years ago in 21 when he was 50. But yeah, that was crazy last year that he finished in second by the end of it. So, no, it's going to be a great week of golf, and let's get into some of the local stuff right now. Still talking about golf. NMU men's and women's golf down at the Lewis Invite this past weekend. And the women's team for the Cats had a really great weekend, coming in first. The men placed in sixth, but NMU golf, of course, we wish they could play up here this time of year, but we don't get a home tournament for the Cats this year. But yeah, this weekend was a positive weekend, especially for the women's team.
Yeah, the women's team finishes first not on the heels. They all shot very well, but Maya Hunter goes for 75 in the first round, 74 in the second round, 149 on the weekend, wins the whole thing, is one stroke behind the leader after day one, and then has a crazy performance on day two to win the whole thing by 6 strokes, 5 birdies on the weekend for her. Just a phenomenal performance. And the thing that I have learned, I'm not a good golfer. Don't claim to be a good golfer.
But you're better than me.
Yeah. Well, we'll see this summer.
Yeah, we're going to find out.
We're going to find out.
Yeah.
Being able to be calm under those moments. You see it with professional golfers. When you're on the green and those putts really matter, and how a birdie can give you, a birdie or par can keep you in the lead, give you another stroke on your lead, and Maya Hunter gets it done, wins by 6 strokes, which is not an easy thing to do, to have that dominant of a lead.
No, that's impressive.
On the second day of competition and win.
Well,
by
especially
6 strokes.
not being the leader after round one. She was sitting there in second, just kind of went off. So good for her. Fun to follow along with this weekend. I know you highlighted them a little bit yesterday. Golf season. I gotta hit the simulator before we go out there for real.
Yeah, and then
the weather this weekend was like golfing weather. I could feel it. I was like, like spring's actually here. It was a weird week last week, obviously, especially here in Negaunee Township, where it was 20 plus inches of snow. Marquette, not as much, but still April snow, and then all of a sudden it was 60 degrees. You're like, oh, okay, it is spring, after all.
Yeah. And the GLIAC champions, GLIAC champions. Hopefully GLIAC champions. GLIAC championships coming up for both golf teams, so that should be exciting.
We'll follow along with those downstate in Michigan, I believe.
They just got to finish in the top 4 for NCAA regional competition, so top 4
and
teams.
then it's more golf.
And then it's more golf. So exciting. Side note, there's been 11 sudden death playoffs in Masters history. The last one in 2017. I remember watching this. Sergio Garcia and Justin Rose.
Yeah.
So
Sergio got what I think might have been definitely his only Masters, might have been his only major as well.
Yeah. So maybe we'll get a sudden death this year and make it 12. But NMU men's and women's golf, GLIAC championships coming up. Place in the top 4 and head to regionals. That's the goal.
Let's stick with the Wildcats for a little bit here. NMU lacrosse was back home this weekend, and all of a sudden their last home game of the year is on Saturday. So we'll be covering that, but they split the weekend. Grand Valley is still Grand Valley. Obviously, a top 10 team knocked them off on Friday, but Sunday they come out and get a win over Davenport. We should mention Minnie Battelle surpasses 200 career goals for the Wildcats. Very impressive. She's been their best player for a couple of years now.
Yep.
But that's a milestone that, really pops out at you. 200 career goals for Battelle.
I think they should name the record book to the
Absolutely.
record book. She has almost every
The
record.
program's still in its infancy,
Yeah.
and she's been a big reason why they've really burst onto the scene, D2 women's lacrosse, over the past couple of years.
Yeah, Wildcats 4 games left. They'll get Concordia St. Paul, their last GLIAC opponent.
Yep.
They'll face them for the first time, and then they'll head on the road, and they'll get Grand Valley, Davenport, and Concordia St. Paul all again to close out the GLIAC regular season. Should be exciting to see what adjustments they make against Grand Valley. Obviously, they're a top 10 program. They've had a lot of success. Last year, the Cats fall against them 11-10 in the GLIAC championship. So
Yeah.
what adjustments can Lindsay Mackerzak and the Cats make next time against Grand Valley? They take care of Davenport. It kind of was over before it was over.
18-7, but I think that's impressive, the
Yeah.
way they responded after the loss to Grand Valley. You think about the last time they had a tough loss, back on March 4th, still in the non-conference, they lost to Rockhurst 12-11, and they came back out 2 days later on what was a Wednesday. I believe that was their spring break trip, and they win 18-7 over William Jewell. Then a pretty bad loss they had at home to Maryville, 25-10, was their first loss of the season, and they responded when College of St. Benedict came in here, and they won 20-3.
Yeah.
So the response has been there for Lindsay Mackerzak's team, really after every point that they've stumbled throughout this year, which is only 3 times. Their record is 10-3 as it stands right now, and that's really impressive, and I think that's signs of a veteran team that they have there in Marquette.
They have these players that kind of, we need to make these adjustments. And when we look at the rest of their season, I think it's Concordia St. Paul, then they get Davenport.
Again. So it's the same weekend on the road this time, April 19th and 20th, and 21st, against Davenport and Grand Valley at their place.
And
so
then in the season with Concordia St. Paul ahead of GLIAC Championship.
Right.
So it is great to see the response that they have when you suffer a loss and it said, we now have to collect ourselves and make some adjustments and then go back out the next day. I know talking with Lindsay earlier in the year when they had those playing 3 games back to back to back.
Yeah.
Not an easy thing to do, but for her players to do that, I think it allowed them to grow, and grow a little bit. Their endurance, kind of their experience goes up a lot. Curious to see what adjustments they make against Grand Valley State. Concordia St. Paul, I think that they should be able to take care of, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, still 2 games against them left on the schedule. So, we'll see what happens. Of course, they get another stab at Grand Valley, and maybe things are a little bit different this time. Obviously, they're hoping for a better result than 17-6 in the final score. So we'll see what happens there. But, their season already kind of winding down a little bit as we get set for high school baseball and softball to start back up. I know the weather was pretty cooperative in melting a lot of that snow this weekend, still going on there right now, so we'll see when those teams can get outside. But I said Lindsay Mackerzak, and made me think of her husband, who's been very active in the transfer portal, and signing a new recruit who was, just 2 days prior named Mr. UP basketball, that being Johnny Ingles from St. Ignace, scored over 2,000 points in his career for the Saints, only the 9th UP boys player to ever do that.
So he knows how to put the ball in the basket.
Yeah, he does. The kid can score. He's only listed at 6 foot, so a little bit small for D2, but the way he handles the ball and the way he can score, like you said, why not go get him? A UP kid whose dad played at NMU, I believe. His mom, Doreen, also went to NMU. They're a basketball family. Matt Mackersack knows Doug Ingles, who was obviously the coach there at St. Ignace for 25 years, hanging it up after this year. But I love that from Mackersack that, knew of this kid and maybe had a scholarship open up, and all of a sudden he's playing for NMU. He's going to be a Wildcat next year.
Yeah, and I think, a great addition, and you'll get that UP fan base, that UP power, dare I say it, when he suits up for the green and gold. And Johnny Ingles, coming in as a freshman.
He's a bucket.
He is a bucket.
I think most of this season, you and I thought it would be Oscar Kangas bringing home Mr. UP basketball, just because we were able to watch Iron Mountain a lot more, based on obviously Iron Mountain being in our viewing area, St. Ignace not being 2.5 hours away. But, we kept seeing enough scores come out where, Johnny Ingles scored 41 points. Johnny Ingles scored 42 points. You're like, oh, this kid can play too. And, of course, Kangas, only a junior, will have a stab at Mr. Basketball next year for sure.
Yeah, Kevin, and should be exciting to see Northern Michigan and how they shape up in the portal for men's and women's basketball, both. Casey Thousand coming off a very successful season with the Cats, making it to the second round of the NCAA tournament. Should be exciting to see what they do. But dare I say that we talk about
Let's take a gander at the All-UP list now that we're talking about Johnny Ingles being Mr. Basketball. So we'll just go through some of the special awards first on the boys' side. Talked about Ingles being Mr. Basketball. He's also Player of the Year in D4, and talked about Kangas being Player of the Year in D1 through 3. No surprise. Your Coach of the Year in D1 through 3, well-deserved, Dan Olkinen of Kingsford. Their run in the postseason especially was really impressive. And during the regular season, they only lost to Iron Mountain and Marquette, two of the best teams in D1 through 3. So Dan Olkinen gets honored. Doug Ingles in D4, no surprise, going to the state semifinal at East Lansing. So Doug Ingles certainly going out on top. Even if it's not a championship, they had a heck of a season and went really, really deep into the playoffs. Team of the Year in D1 and 2 is Marquette. As the only D1 team, they were really good all year. When it happened, we talked about them kind of getting screwed in the postseason. They did, but an incredible season from the Sentinels. And Menominee for D3 made it just as far as Kingsford. You were at those games. I forget, was that...
in Gaylord,
Is that state quarterfinal?
Yeah.
Yeah. So both of those teams advancing to the state quarterfinals. Great seasons for the Flivers and the Maroons, and then St. Ignace in D4. The Dream Team, loved watching a lot of these kids play this year. Levi Fromm of Jeffers. Watching him win the district title along with the Jets over Westwood. And then ran into a Menominee team that it was hard to match up with. But, man, Jeffers could shoot this year, and they could score, and Levi Fromm was a big part of that. Gavin Grondin, junior from Kingsford, we're really excited to watch him play next year because I think he's going to take a step up.
Yeah, going to be even higher than he was, and plays with a lot of heart, a lot of energy, gets up and down, can shoot, and when he is on, Kevin Grondin is on, watch out, because he's gonna put the ball in the basket.
Absolutely. Joining him on the Dream Team is Oscar Kangas, Jacob McPhee from Marquette, another junior. So a lot of juniors on this Dream Team, being Grondin, Kangas, and Jacob McPhee, and then Johnny Ingles rounds out the Dream Team. He's a senior, of course, like we talked about, is going to be a Wildcat. So that full list is on UpperMichiganSource.com. And you can also check out the girls list, which we'll talk about right now. But as expected, I think Keegan and I, you and I talked about this probably midway through the season. It was Ella Mason's Miss UP basketball to lose, and she didn't lose it.
No, she didn't.
She is your Miss UP basketball, well-deserved for the Negaunee Minor.
Yeah, always scoring, obviously, but I think it was her play when she didn't, have an open shot.
Her leadership, too.
Her leadership. Being kind of that senior voice and that
absolutely
that hey, I've been here for a couple of years now. I understand how it has to go. Leads her team all the way. to East Lansing, and they go up against a well-coached and talented team, and
in Detroit Edison,
Edison,
down in East Lansing.
In East Lansing. And unfortunately, it doesn't go their way, but the run that they've had, talking to Mike O'Donnell, getting over that regional hump and winning the region and getting to East Lansing and tasting what it's
just
like.
going to play at the Breslin Center it's like going to the Final Four and, in college basketball, just making it out of there, making it out of the state quarterfinals, making it out of the regionals is an incredible accomplishment. Not everyone can win it like Ishpeming in Division IV. That's what they did. So Ella Mason, your Miss Basketball in the UP this year. She's also the Player of the Year in D1 through 3. In Division IV, it's the two teams. It was that all year. You couldn't say it any other way. Jenna Mackey is your Player of the Year in Division IV. Well deserved as well.
Yeah, phenomenal player, phenomenal leader, I think too, and she led the Hematites too. And sometimes people didn't see it, but she led them with her play and guiding kind of some of these younger players.
She scored 30 in the state semifinal game. She probably could have scored 30 in every one of their games, but she didn't need to. That's not what Ryan Riegel was asking her to do. They were a very deep team. They went deep into their bench, and that was a big advantage they had in the postseason, that they could play 8 or 9, and the 8th and 9th girls off the bench would contribute almost just as much as the starters. They were deep, and Jenna Mackey knew that. She was their best player, being a senior, and well-deserved honor for her. She really led the Hematites this season, like I said, being the eldest, player that they had trotting out there, who is also supremely talented. So much deserved from her. The coaches of the year, Mike O'Donnell and Ryan Riegel. Not much to add there. Those are the right picks. And the teams of the year, Negaunee in D1 and 2. Bark River Harris had a great year. Nina Bauer goes out before the postseason. That stunk for the Broncos because I thought they could have made a little bit more of a run. But Lauren Zawada was also awesome for them.
Fun to watch.
All season long, loved watching her play. And Ishpeming, obviously, Team of the Year in D4. So on your dream team, Lily Johnson, I believe only a sophomore this year, so we have 2 more years of Lily Johnson at Gladstone. Ella Mason, Jenna Mackey, Kira Mackey from Escanaba. She was a senior this year, had a great season for the Eskimos. Danica Shamian, also another senior from West Iron County. They made a late push in the postseason. It took them a little bit. You knew they had Danica Shamian leading them as a senior, supremely talented athlete, and her sister Lacey Shamian. They didn't really put it together till late in the season. They were fun to watch down the stretch of the year. So West Iron County has some representation on the dream team, and then Janessa Eagle, the sophomore for the Hematites. This isn't the last time she's going to be on the dream team.
No, scores 27 to lift her team back from an 11-point deficit in the third quarter of the state title game. And, it was like a video game.
Enough said, from Eagle.
Her, in the paint, layup, jump shot from the elbow, three-pointer.
She's another player that got a lot better as the season went on. So she'll be fun to watch the next couple of years, along with Maya Hammer, another sophomore. We'll be talking to them this week. So really good stuff from a bunch of the girls' teams. Obviously, Ishpeming and Negaunee, number 1 and 2 all year long, at least in the UP. Obviously in different divisions, but we were fortunate to have them in different divisions, so they weren't knocking each other out of the postseason. Because that would have stunk.
Yeah, excluding the postseason, you look at those 2 teams; they were perfect, except when they played each other. Right? They were perfection, right? They were as good as they could get. And we just talked. Ishpeming just recently had their celebration, and we just talked to Lily Swanson, and she said, "We needed that. We needed to go up against the team."
I love the honesty from Lily Swanson, another senior on Ishpeming.
Yeah, that was, Negaunee was a great team, and we needed that to prepare us.
Sure.
And what's that? I'm quoting the Meet the Robinsons animated.
Yeah.
Peanut butter and jelly gun. When you win all the time, you don't learn as much. When you lose, you got a little bit more to learn, and you can.
But I think Ryan Riegel deserves a lot of credit for when they were winning. There were always takeaways and ways to get better.
Yeah, there was. Yep.
There was no complacency from that team all season long. That's why they're state champions.
Yeah.
If they were just winning every game, like, okay, this is going to be easy in the postseason, we're just going to win every game again. Yeah, they did, but not without the preparation and the film and everything they did. Even when they were winning by 30, 40 points every game, I think the average on the season, their average margin of victory was 24.9.
Yes. So 25. But yeah, they were getting better every single game, and you look at the
That's kind of hard to do when you're blowing teams out.
Yeah, and when you look at the intensity that they played with all season, and talking to head coach Ryan Riegel, they had to play like that to get to where they are. When you look at who they played in the postseason, when they got to the Breslin Center, the Fowler Eagles, a good team.
Great team.
And if you don't play...
But a young team, but Ishpeming's young too, and they just really had a game plan, and Fowler never really had a chance. Kingston in the title game, they kept up with the press in the first half, and
did a really
the
good
Hematites
job.
were turning the ball over. That didn't bother them.
No.
And that'll always stand out to me, the way Jenna Mackey said, we weren't nervous when we went down 11. And I said to you, I was like,
I was nervous.
I was a little nervous. I'd never seen you guys go down 11. But credit to them, it was just steady all season long. So that's why they have so many players represented on this list. The all UP teams certainly deserving, and a lot of them will be back on the list next year.
Yeah.
Before we get out of here, talk some spring football.
Spring football.
So Tech spring game coming up this coming weekend. The NMU spring game we had last Saturday. Kind of a low-scoring affair. I mean, spring games, there's never that much intrigue with the final score, at least. It's more seeing different guys out there. And Shane Richardson, now entering year 2, needs to improve, obviously.
Yeah.
They went winless last season, and part of the spring is making sure you're getting better so that when the games really do arrive in the fall, you're ready to compete and win some of them and make improvements. And it starts with the rosters we saw out there. Aiden Horde was the freshman quarterback who came in. His first start was the Miners Cup, where they got blown out by Tech. He was a freshman and only had the back half of the season to really work on himself. He looked pretty good being out there on Saturday. His team won 10-0. It was their first drive of the game where they scored the touchdown. It was a toss over the middle to Sam Pfeiffer after Horde and Pfeiffer connected down the field earlier on that drive. So that was good to see. Pfeiffer now entering his 3rd year with the program. Of course, Horde going into year 2 would expect him to be the starting quarterback next year. Suiting up for Team Gold at quarterback, trying to remember who, it was Nick Stevenson, number 10. So he'll be in the mix next year. And then as we aired on Saturday, a couple of the local recruits were out there to watch the game. Trevor Turkoff from Menominee took his team to a state championship game last year. Kyla Carr, who as a junior went down to Ford Field to the state championship game with Nagani. So he'll be suiting up with the Wildcats next year. And Tucker Welch from Marquette, hometown kid, was their running back this past year. He's also signed to the program. So they're out there watching and trying to figure out what's going to be expected of them. I know we're really excited to watch them at the next level because we watched them a lot in high school, and really hoping that they can carve out a role for themselves going forward. Next year, that might be a tough ask, especially at the D2 level. You don't get the early enrollees. So, a lot of D1 commits are already at their school getting ready for next year. These guys don't have the ability to do that. So they'll be getting going in the summer, and we'll see what they can do. But spring game overall, I wish they scored a little bit more, but, what are you supposed to do? Shane Richardson said he was very happy with, what he saw, and you got to take his word for it and say, okay, well, he's making progress. If he liked what he saw, then that means he's at least a little bit confident going into next year with where they are now and where they could be by the end of August when they actually take the field.
Yeah, and I think, the spring game, it's a good look at, okay, it's our first kind of real live scrimmage, as Shane Richardson said, we split into 2 teams and we played and we were out there and, getting the kind of the game-like scenarios where it's full tackle, they didn't full tackle all the time, but it's full tackle. They played a game.
Quarterbacks were the only ones in red jerseys. So.
Yeah. So
there were some real hits for sure.
And that starts to prepare you, and I think you got to go into this next season with not holding anything back, right? You got to know that last season happened.
Yeah.
And you got to know, hey, now we have the chance to improve upon it. I think that, Shane Richardson being there now a second year, the guys there have kind of learned a little bit more of the system and gotten more familiar and comfortable with it. But it's going to be a test, right? You're coming into your next season. You now have not won a game in what will be a year.
Right.
Right? So it's not going to be easy, right? And every team...
That's a big hump to get over.
Yeah.
I mean, I think about Purdue playing their first round game this year against Grambling State. It's like...
Big thing.
For NMU football, it shouldn't be that difficult to win a game. But once they win one, then you're like, okay.
Yeah.
We got that out of the way.
You got to get one, yeah.
And now we can just play football.
Yeah.
But until they get there, it's going to be looming over them like, gosh, we haven't won a game since, 2022. That sucks. When are we going to do it? So if they get that out of the way early, we haven't seen a schedule from them yet. But once we do, you can kind of see like, okay, they're going to get a win in the non-conference, and then after that, all bets are off. They're probably. It'd be surprising to me if they were above 500, but even that's it's hard to just go day and night.
Yeah, it's hard to go
talking
from
about college
not
football.
winning to now winning a GLIAC championship. When you also look at who is in the GLIAC,
right?
In the Grand Valley.
Would I expect them to beat
State.
Grand Valley State and Ferris State next year? No. But do they have to for it to be a successful season? No, they don't need to do that.
No.
On the flip side, do I expect them to lose 62-0 to Tech next year? No. Even if they don't beat Tech, it doesn't mean it's not a successful season because you lost to Tech by 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
I think you're just trying to improve any way you can, and obviously that's their intention. We'll see what happens in the fall, but we did get a glimpse at the NMU Wildcats in their football program on Saturday. We'll get the same from Tech. This coming Saturday, they were 500 last year. It's going to be year 2 under Dan Metlack as well. Obviously, he was on staff before, so he had more to work with.
Yeah.
And Tech was in a better spot to begin with, but they'll definitely want to improve and be above 500 next year. A couple of those losses, you understand when you're going up against Grand Valley and Ferris, it's tough to come out on top. That would be a huge upset if they did.
A couple of them
actually came close, so maybe they're in position to knock those teams off next year.
Yeah.
So again, we'll get a look at the Huskies this Saturday. And then, of course, it'll be a long time to wait until football season.
A couple months, but we'll get there.
Yeah, we'll have the nice weather, some baseball and softball to cover. Obviously, golf, we'll be watching it this weekend, but then some tournaments will return here to the UP, and we are looking forward to that. So that should do it from us on the UP Power Podcast today. For Keegan Cooper, I'm Kevin McNulty. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be back next week with maybe a guest. We'll see. Thanks for joining us.